안녕하세요.
The rain fell heavily over Seoul, painting the city with silver streaks beneath the bright streetlights. The dark sky mirrored the mood of many hurrying under their umbrellas, trying to escape the biting cold of the night. In the imposing glass building of the JH Group, the clock had already passed midnight, but Kang Ji-ho, the cold and calculating CEO, was still at his desk, his sharp eyes scanning financial reports. He exuded exhaustion, but his discipline wouldn't allow him to step away from the work until every detail was reviewed. The luxurious office, surrounded by panoramic windows, offered a spectacular view of the city. But for Ji-ho, Seoul was just a chessboard, and he needed to ensure that his pieces were always in the right places. The world of business didn't forgive weaknesses. It was with this thought that he sighed, massaging his temples before finally deciding to go downstairs for a coffee. His assistants had already gone home, leaving the office in absolute silence. Downstairs, in the vast marble lobby, Yoon Hanul sighed as she held her mop, the weight of fatigue pressing on her shoulders. As a member of the cleaning staff, she had long accepted her invisible role in the company. Her night shift meant she rarely crossed paths with the building's big shots. For her, that wasn't a problem. The job was simply a means to support her family and pay the overdue bills. There was no room for grand dreams in her life. A sudden noise broke the silence. Startled, Hanul turned just in time to see an imposing figure stepping out of the elevator, none other than Kang Ji-ho. His mere presence made the air tense. Dressed in a charcoal gray tailored suit, his flawless posture revealed the authority he wielded. He walked leisurely, his eyes fixed on his phone, until he took an awkward step. The freshly cleaned floor didn't forgive him. Thud. Hanul's eyes widened. The all-powerful CEO had slipped and fallen awkwardly on the wet floor. Silence settled in. She wanted to laugh, but knew she shouldn't. The scene was almost comical. The most feared man in the company, now on the floor, wearing an expression of pure disbelief. Ji-ho groaned, adjusting his tie with the little dignity he had left. His piercing gaze fixed on her. Who in their right mind leaves the floor like this? His voice was sharp and impatient. Hanul bit her lip, gripping the mop tighter. Maybe someone who didn't expect the CEO to be wandering around like a ghost at this hour, she murmured to herself. Ji-ho narrowed his eyes. What did you say? Nothing. She forced a polite smile. Are you hurt, sir? She extended her hand, but Ji-ho stood up on his own, adjusting his sleeves in irritation. His pride was more hurt than his body. He gave her one last look, this seemingly ordinary woman who dared to respond to him in kind. There was something about her, something irritating, but strangely intriguing. The next morning, Ji-ho was reviewing employee files when a familiar name appeared. Yoon Hanul. A cleaning staff member? Why did that name catch his attention? Sir, we urgently need to fill the position of personal assistant, his secretary informed him. Without thinking much, Ji-ho drummed his pen against the desk and gave a faint smile. Send Yoon Hanul to my office. Immediately. And so, their fates were intertwined. Yoon Hanul adjusted her uniform and took a deep breath before knocking on the imposing door to the CEO's office. The unexpected call in the morning had left her uneasy. Never before had a cleaning staff member been directly summoned by the company president. What could she have possibly done wrong? Come in! Kang Ji-ho's deep voice echoed from the other side. Hesitantly, she opened the door, feeling tiny in front of the luxurious decor. The office reflected the man who occupied it. Sophisticated, organized, and intimidating. Ji-ho was sitting behind his oak desk, reviewing some documents. He didn't even look up when Hanul entered. The silence stretched for seconds that felt like an eternity. Then, finally, he spoke. Yoon Hanul. She swallowed hard. Yes, sir? He placed the papers on the desk and interlaced his fingers. As of today, you are no longer part of the cleaning team. Hanel's heart almost stopped. Her stomach twisted. What did that mean? Was she being fired? Desperation consumed her thoughts. She needed this job. Sir, please, if it's because of last night, I swear I didn't mean to. Ji-ho raised his hand, interrupting her. I'm not firing you. I'm promoting you. Silence. Hanul blinked, unable to believe what she had just heard. Promoting? He nodded, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. I need a new personal assistant, and I've chosen you. The shock was so great that she could only let out a nervous laugh. With all due respect, sir, but I'm a cleaning staff member. I don't have experience as an assistant. Jiho leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Exactly. You don't have professional bad habits. You have no ulterior motives. You're someone who already works here and, by all indications, knows how to keep her mouth shut. She furrowed her brow. And what if I refuse? His eyes gleamed with something that seemed like a challenge. Then I'll fire you. The air left Hanel's lungs. It was either this or nothing. How could she refuse? She couldn't afford to be unemployed, especially with her family depending on her. Swallowing her nervousness, she nodded slowly. All right, I accept. A slight smile appeared at the corner of Jiho's lips. Great. Your new role starts now. And with that, Yoon Hanul's life changed forever. Yoon Hanul didn't have time to adjust to her new role. As soon as she accepted the position, she was immediately taken to a smaller office next to Kang Jiho's room. An older secretary handed her a stack of documents and a full schedule of appointments. The work seemed overwhelming. She sighed, looking at the organized desk and the brand new laptop in front of her. How could a simple cleaning staff member suddenly become the assistant to the CEO of one of South Korea's largest companies? Before she could get lost in her thoughts, Jiho entered her office without knocking. His analytical gaze briefly scanned her before landing on the documents. Read all of this and memorize the details of the meetings. Hanul's eyes widened. All of this? But it's pages and pages. He crossed his arms, unbothered. Welcome to the corporate world, Yoon Hanul. She huffed, picking up the first sheet. Jiho observed her frustration for a moment before returning to his own office. He didn't know exactly why he had chosen her, but something about her sparked his curiosity. The hours dragged on, and when Hanel finally started to understand the terms of the documents, an urgent phone call had Jiho summoning her. She hurried in, trying to appear professional. Yes, sir? Jiho massaged his temples. The board has rescheduled the investors' meeting to tomorrow morning. I need you to reorganize my agenda and inform the involved parties. Hanul swallowed nervously. She had never done anything like this before. With trembling hands, she grabbed the phone and started dialing the numbers listed in the spreadsheet. Each call was a struggle against her own insecurity, but somehow she managed to complete the task. When she finished, Jiho was watching her in silence. Not bad. She looked up. Thank you, I think? He smiled slightly. A rare gesture. We'll see if it stays that way. That night, as she left the building exhausted, Hanul realized she had entered an entirely different world, and somehow she felt like this was just the beginning. The next morning began in a frenzy. The JH Group building was busier than usual, with directors and investors arriving for the early meeting. Yoon Hanul, still getting used to the exhausting routine, was reviewing the final details of the meeting while following Jiho to the conference room. He, as always, appeared flawless and unshakable, while she struggled to maintain her composure. As they entered, the high-level executive's eyes turned toward her. Quiet murmurs began. Isn't that the cleaning staff? Whispered one of the directors. Hanul felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her head held high. The meeting started, and Jiho presented the numbers and strategies with his usual precision. However, one of the investors, Mr. Choi, asked an unexpected question, challenging one of the company's expansion plans. A tense silence filled the room. Jiho was preparing to respond, but instinctively, Hanul intervened. Actually, sir, when reviewing the reports yesterday, I noticed that the growth projection for this sector outweighs the indicated risks. The international market has already shown this trend in competing companies. Everyone in the room turned to her, surprised. Jiho slightly tilted his head, observing his assistant with renewed interest. Mr. Choi chuckled, adjusting his glasses. Interesting. The president's assistant has a sharp eye. The meeting continued without further conflict. And at the end, Jiho called Hanul back to his office. How did you know that? He asked, crossing his arms. She swallowed nervously. I just read the reports, sir. I thought it was part of my job. A small smile formed at the corner of his lips. Keep it up. Hanul felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. Kang Jiho was a man hard to impress, and somehow she had managed to do so. But that moment of triumph was soon interrupted by an unexpected visit. The office door abruptly opened, and an elegant woman entered without being announced. Her cold gaze landed on Hanul before turning to Jiho. "We need to talk." Hanul didn't know who she was, but by the way Jiho sighed, massaging his temple, it was clear that this woman was no ordinary acquaintance. And so, a new obstacle appeared before them. Yoon Hanul instinctively stepped back when the elegant woman entered the office without warning. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Kang Jiho's rigid posture revealed his displeasure, but he kept his expression impassive. "Madame Kang." He greeted her formally. Hanul blinked, surprised. It was his mother. The woman ignored Hanel's presence and went straight to the point. "Jiho, we need to talk about your future fiancé." Silence fell heavily over the room. Hanul's heart began to race. Fiancé? Jiho wasn't engaged, was he? He rubbed his temple and sighed. "Mother, we've discussed this before. I'm not going to accept an arranged marriage." Madame Kang crossed her arms. "The Han family is waiting for an answer. You know this union would bring benefits to the company. Your father would never have hesitated." Jiho clenched his jaw. "I am not my father." Hanul felt as if she should leave, but her legs felt like they were glued to the floor. Madame Kang finally cast a critical glance toward her. "And who is this?" Jiho hesitated for a second before answering. "My personal assistant." The woman's sharp eyes scanned Hanul from head to toe. "Assistant, huh? Curious? Usually, you don't choose assistants without experience." Hanul lowered her head, feeling the tension in the air. Jiho stepped forward, shielding her with his presence. "If you're here just to talk about this, I believe we're done." Madame Kang sighed and turned to leave. But before she left, she shot one last look at Hanul. "I hope you know your place." As soon as the door closed, Jiho let out a heavy sigh. He turned to Hanul, who was still trying to process everything. "I'm sorry about that." She finally found her voice. "Is she serious? Do you have an arranged fiancé?" Jiho rubbed the back of his neck, looking frustrated. "My family has always tried to control my life, but I won't give in." Hanul felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Something stirred inside her as she saw him bearing such a heavy weight on his shoulders. But what did this mean for her? And why did she feel so involved in it? Jiho stared at her for a moment, then said quietly, "I make my own choices, Hanul." Her heart raced, and in that instant, she realized she was crossing a dangerous line. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Yoon Hanul tried to keep her distance, but her heart stubbornly clung to every glance exchanged, every word spoken by Kang Jiho. The pressure on him only grew. The media began to speculate about the possible arranged marriage, and his mother's presence in the company became a constant. With each visit, Madame Kang made her disdain for Hanul clear. But nothing could have prepared Hanul for the shock of the night when Jiho appeared at her door. She opened the door, surprised to see him standing there, with a serious yet determined expression. "Jiho? What are you doing here?" He took a deep breath. "I've made a decision." Hanul crossed her arms, trying to ignore the growing nervousness inside her. "What decision?" "I'm going to renounce the company merger and the arranged marriage." The shock made her take a step back. "What? But that could affect your position as CEO." Jiho nodded without hesitation. "I know, but none of that matters if I can't choose my own path, and if I can't choose who I want to be with." The air seemed to leave Hanul's lungs. "Jiho." He took a step forward, holding her hands. "I want to be with you, Hanul. Not because it's forbidden or because it defies my family, but because by your side I feel myself." She felt tears welling up in her eyes. The man who once seemed unreachable was now standing there, vulnerable before her. "Are you sure about this?" Her voice trembled. He smiled, that rare and sincere smile. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Tears rolled down Hanul's face, but this time they were tears of happiness. She threw herself into his arms, feeling his heart beat rapidly against hers. Months later, the ceremony was simple but elegant. Jiho made it clear that he didn't want an extravagant event, just something genuine. To everyone's surprise, his mother attended, keeping her distance but eventually moving closer to her new daughter-in-law. "I still think he could have made a better choice," Madame Kang said, adjusting her gloves. "But I admit, he's never been this happy." Hanul smiled, holding Jiho's hand. "And that's all that matters." When Jiho pulled her to the dance floor, Hanul realized that, despite all the challenges, they had found their happy ending. And most importantly, they were just beginning their new life together.